On this episode of College Admission TV, Dr. J.P. Novin speaks with Jeremy Singer, president of the College Board, about its 125-year evolution and the role technology plays in improving student outcomes.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Higher Education Leader Podcast. This season, we're focused on AI, education, and the future of workforce. I'd like to thank our sponsor, ASU GSV Conference, for supporting this series, and our listeners. You could now find the conversation on Spotify and watch it on College Admission TV. I'm your host, JP Novin, and today I'm honored to be joined by Jeremy Singer, president of the College Board. Jeremy, welcome to the Higher Education Leader Podcast.
Thank you, JP. Glad to be here.
Now, College Board, just for our audience, I'm sure everyone is familiar, but just to give a summary, you represent more than 6,000 schools, colleges, and universities worldwide. You're best known for your advanced placement, AP, the SAT, and Big Future, helping millions of students. You are the president of College Board and a trustee at Goucher College, and you bring a very unique perspective in bridging K-12 and higher education ecosystem. I also want to point out that last year, you took a 6-month leave from the College Board to serve as FAFSA executive advisor at the U.S. Department of Education, and we thank you for that because we know what happened the year before, where you helped launch the redesigned 2025-26 FAFSA. So with that, I can't go into everything you've done because it's so impressive, everything you've done in your career. So I'm going to hand it to you. Tell us a little bit about your background and also about a little bit about College Board that I haven't covered for our audience, please.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the intro. I will say I refer to my 6 months at the Feds as the world's worst sabbatical because it was not very restful, but at the end we felt proud of what we accomplished. But yeah, so, I think you summarized well. I've been in the intersection of education and technology now, I'm embarrassed to admit, for 25 plus years. I've worked in for-profits, Fortune 500 companies, startups, and then as well as a number of both small and large nonprofits. And the through line of my experience has been, can you leverage technology to improve student outcomes? And so I was at McGraw-Hill and I ran a digital division that was providing products to college professors to use with their students. I ran test prep at Kaplan, and then, as you noted, for the last dozen plus years, I've been at College Board. Just a little more on College Board. I think you nailed it. I mean, people don't realize we're a nonprofit. The common question I get is, are we based in Princeton, which is where ETS is? We're not based in Princeton, although we do a lot of work with ETS. And we're celebrating our 125th year anniversary this year. So we're super proud of how we help expand access. We can talk more later. I don't want to bore you, but we've started, 125 years ago, we had a much more narrow goal. We were started by a number of very selective colleges to help them expand the geography of where they could find students. They were primarily East Coast schools, and they were primarily finding students in the Northeast, and they wanted to figure out a mechanism to find students from across the U.S. at the time. Since then, as you said, we have 6,000 members, almost every college, and I've listened to a number of your podcasts, are great. So almost every president of those colleges are members of College Board. And so we're serving a much more dynamic and broader set of colleges. And so we've evolved our programs as such. And then I think of late, we've also are trying to serve all students in high school. And so some of those students, as you know, aren't going directly to four-year colleges, two-year college, or aren't going to college at all. And so we've also started to work more directly with employers, and how do we prep and support students in that path, not just sort of a single or just a select set of paths. So that's been the piece. Last thing I'll say on advanced placement is, essentially what advanced placement are, for those your listeners that don't know, is it is college level rigor courses that are offered in high school. And we've had a really, really a wonderful run there. It's very, again, college level. So it's rigorous curriculum. It's a single exam that is psychometrically valid. And it's a great opportunity for students to show their work, to get college credit, and to get ready for college and know what college is about. So personally, I'll say I love data. And one of the things that got me into this and keeps me motivated is looking at what works and what are things in education that have been proven to both have a positive impact on student learning and can scale. And so back in the 90s, that far back, George Lucas Education Foundation, which is now Edutopia, launched this database website really at the time, the database underneath it, about what works in education. I was so excited, JP, when that launched. I was like, oh, we're going to solve this, because now we're going to, I thought the issue wasn't that there wasn't a lot of things that worked. It was an issue that people just didn't know. And fast forward 25 plus years, and very few things in education have proven to both where you could demonstrate success and then scale. So that's been a very frustrating or it's been maddening part of my career. And I recently launched a podcast called The Education Equation that's going to pursue trying to ask those questions and find out if we can discover stuff that works. So anyway, a lot there. Take us where you will.
Well, I couldn't agree more with you, because when I started going into every other company I launched was not about education. And I found quickly that education is so nonlinear and so difficult, even more difficult than healthcare, because there's really not one answer. And that's why I'm excited about AI, because I think it allows us to at least get better feedback loop, hopefully.
Totally agree. Yeah.
College Board just released a new national survey data on AI in high schools, and it's a comprehensive look so far at how students, parents, and educators are using and thinking about generative AI. For our audience, can you summarize what stood out to you most in that research?
I think in that research and other, we have the wonderful benefit of being a membership organization. So we're constantly interacting and listening to and learning from our members, which include college presidents, enrollment officers, financial aid officers, college professors, high school teachers, school counselors, and students, and so as many others. So we're constantly gathering data. And I'd say, a lot of students are, first of all, I think students are ahead of where teachers and administrators are. And that's not surprising. I've heard you talk about it as well. Adults are going to be slower to the new technology. That is the way of the world. It's always been the case. And so I think students are more advanced in how they're using it. I think they're using it for a lot of smart ways, or at least they're acknowledging using the smart ways of like summarizing, quizzing themselves, helping, assisting in research. And I think educators, I think that the good news where we've seen sort of the positive, optimistic view of AI, or even the most positive, is what you see with some teachers and professors who are taking tasks that can be done by AI, like lesson planning, some grading things that sort of consume time, but they don't necessarily love or like, and using AI to make them more efficient. And that allows them to do more things like interact with students directly and focus on the teaching. So that's a positive. So we're seeing some numbers in that that are I think that are heartening. But there's also concerns out there.
So as you look at all of these students, entering universities, obviously we know the enrollment cliff is going to start hitting harder starting next year and for the next decade. And we also have, I would say, the negative perception of college degree that has increased a little bit, but still, I think the number of students who are taking the college entrance exam has steadily increased, surprisingly. How do you perceive the impact of AI on the future of workforce, especially college graduates, in the next 5 years?
Yeah. Well, I like that you pointed out, we talk a lot about the all three forces, the demographic cliff, the change in perception of higher ed. So we agree, and I think our members are struggling with some of that. I do think AI is at a whole different level, though, of impact. To your question, I think it will reshape almost every job over the next 5 years, and not always in ways that we'll be comfortable with. Again, an optimistic view is it will automate some routine tasks and free up to do higher value stuff. And I think that's partially true. And we've seen that, as I mentioned, in education, we're seeing that in other spaces. But in reality and in practice, I think some roles are definitely going to get squeezed. If you think of middle skill, process heavy jobs, AI can do most, if not all, of those roles. And so that's scary for for some prospects in employment. And one thing that I've learned as I've talked to a lot of companies, and as we've thought about the use of AI, and this is overly simplistic, but I think some companies are using it to improve their service, improve their product, grow, et cetera. And some are using it to cut costs and trying to just use it for efficiency. And my hope is where they're using it for the former, yes, some jobs will be casualties, but much less. And they'll produce better products, better services, et cetera, but not at the cost of a lot of jobs. And so we'll see. We're definitely a College Board sort of looking at it in the first of, like, how do we better serve students? How do we better serve our members? How can we leverage AI? And again, if it means, it may not mean fewer customer support people. It may mean better customer service and better feeding the customer service feedback into our product development, as a couple examples.
Let's keep it to 5 years as we look at the next, because AI is the speed by which it's evolving is unprecedented. So 5 years is like 50 years.
No question.
With everything else. So what professions do you think are at risk? Like, do you have some examples? You're like,
yeah,
it's like this profession may not be around 5 years from now.
I don't know if the profession, maybe, people, if you think about driverless cars and taxi drivers and so forth, that is definitely having an impact, but it's slower. The Bay Area is one thing, but nationwide acceptance for some good reasons, some from not so good reasons. So, but I would say things like knowledge and information industries. So let's think law, finance, marketing, journalism, even software development. I think those won't go away, but I think AI is going to encroach a lot in those roles, and those would be harder professions to find jobs in. I don't think it'll be impossible. I think it's AI can handle text, numbers, images, etc. And in particular, like if you think of the entry level jobs, those are the easiest. I think everybody's struggling with, if we don't have, most companies, as you know well, is they have they have a pyramid structure where they bring in a lot of people and some of them advance. And if that incoming flow gets decimated, then who are the people in 5 years that are going to be filling those spots? So that's tricky. I think I mentioned customer support and some of those services role. Again, I think AI will be quite disruptive there. What's safe is probably easier. You could argue the physical, physical services like some plumbing and all of that, skilled trades, some of the healthcare ones that rely on relational work are I think safer, at least for now. Ones that depend on ability to show empathy and trust, that require a certain level of problem solving. But to your point, 5 years is a long time in AI world. It could be 50 years equivalent. And we may see such sophistication of AI in that time that even those may not be that safe. We had a board meeting recently, and we talked about AI and how it influence all our members. And I led a breakout with just admissions officers at like 6 or 7 colleges, And they were like, well, the admissions process, and then we sort of brainstormed like, well, AI you could ingest 30 years of admissions data into AI of every applicant, everyone who's accepted, every decision, every grade they got that got accepted and that matriculated, every grade they got. If you have employment data, you could do that. And you could develop, like, the AI could so quickly just consume just such massive amount of data and then make even better decisions based on that data than any human could possibly. So we left kind of, oh God, even some professions we thought were somewhat protected seem at risk.
So I remember when I was in high school in Santa Cruz High School. I remember this. I was still in high school. They talked about this Gopher email system, and we're like, "What are you talking about?" Then the discussion came in, but within 10 years, we had Amazon, we had Google, and obviously between that we had Alta Vista and InfoSeek and all of these other, Ask Jeeves, so all of these other things, but internet did evolve. Really, we found a day, and we had so many. I mean, obviously, Friendster, Facebook took over that, but within 15 years, completely, you had huge industries around internet, including our company, would not be around if it wasn't for internet. So we know new jobs are going to be created. As you think about test taking in particular, and how colleges are dealing with AI literacy, what could test taking, like college exam, essentially look like? I mean, do you really need to look at people's writing and a lot of?
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think the way we're approaching a College Board is sort of a 3-part questions. The first is, what skills are going to be needed in a future AI job world? And I think it's that's hard to answer, and it's a moving target because, as you mentioned, like, AI keeps evolving. But these things, some of what's called durable skills, communications, teamwork, problem solving. There'll be elements of those that are still going to be quite important. And by the way, those skills were already being, even before AI, we were seeing people no longer working for Microsoft for 40 years or 30 years. They were shifting jobs much more frequently and changing industries. And so, same way, like, just learning a particular profession is more limited. You need certain skills that transfer between professions, and that's going to be even more important with AI. So one is define what skills individuals actually need. And I would argue there's elements of writing and problem solving that are still critical. I think you'd probably agree. Then the second thing is, okay, now how do you effectively teach those skills? And we're grappling with that in our advanced placement courses. We're trying to integrate, we've always had certain things, like we have document-based questions that forces students to pull multiple, maybe letters or pictures, and synthesize to create arguments and so forth, versus just simple summarization. So some of those skills we think are still going to be important. But we're amping up in all our courses things around problem solving, teamwork, all the skills that we think are critical. And I think colleges are doing similar work. Then the last part, which you start to get into, is, okay, now you've defined what the skills are, and again, you evolve those pretty rapidly because they're not going to be static. You figure out how to teach them. How do you assess them? And that keeps us up at night, because we've called it internally an authenticity crisis. And again, this was happening, JP, before AI. So, if you talk to admissions officers at a lot of colleges, they'll tell you very hard to tell what truly the student did. Did they write that essay? Was it their parent? Was it someone hired? Is that club real? Is that club, or even if it's a real club, was that created by their dad? So trying to evaluate whether this student's going to be successful at this college was already difficult. Now AI has made it that much harder. And mixed with grade inflation, which we've seen both in high school and colleges, where it's at least the wealthier schools, it's pretty hard not to get straight A's. Then it makes it really impossible. Like, what grades are no longer a good proxy for this student will be ready for that college, and then all the other pieces can be manufactured, particularly with AI. So how do college professors make good decisions? How do college professors or how do students get placed into the right classes in college? How do employers make good decisions? I'm hearing from employers now that an X GPA from a certain college used to mean something more, but now they're seeing those graduates and they don't have the skill because they basically, because of great inflation, because of AI, they sort of skated through college without really engaging the material. So that is terrifying, for all the reasons that are obvious. So where we've been doubling down, and we hope to be able to support both higher ed and K-12, is we developed our own high stakes software called Bluebook. This year we've already tested 12 million students on Bluebook. It's an in-person software. It shuts down everything else. So we know when the student takes an AP exam or an SAT exam, we know that their score is their work. Now, I'm not saying it should ever be the single metric or the end all be all of a metric, but at least it's one piece of data that is authentic. It is that student. And so we're trying to work with colleges and high schools to think about, can you implement similar ways to assess that it is the student's work? You have AI somehow turned off. It won't always be off, but for certain moments, so you can validate. And also it will require the student to engage in the work and really learn the work, because they can't skate by if they know they're going to be held accountable at some point without AI. And so it's not to shut our eyes and say, dig your head in the sand, but it's to try to figure out, are there assessments that realistically or that accurately assess what a student knows. So that's part of how we're approaching it. I'll say a couple other quick things. We're trying to think hard about when the calculator came along, the SAT, people this long time ago when it became very available, everyone said, oh, you can't, you don't need to teach math anymore. And yes, you still need to teach certain things in math. There are certain things you don't need to teach any longer, right? Certain computational things that you had to teach them how to do a hand. Why would you ever do it? You can use a calculator. But as you know, things like the multiplication tables, you got to learn that. That has to be rote. You can't use working memory to say, if you have to say 5 times 6, oh, it's 30, and I have to type it in a calculator. That's a disaster. So we think similarly, there are going to be core skills that you still need to learn. And you may have followed, there was an MIT study that got released about writing, and it was a small sample, so I don't want to overdraw from it, but they showed that some students who purely used AI versus didn't, their actual development, their cognitive development was different. And their answer wasn't just you can't use AI at all to write, but you should use AI in editing and certain reviews. But some of the actual content creation, you have to do without AI. And if you don't, you're not going to develop those skills. So there's a lot here that we have to figure out. And we're really at the early stages. I think most colleges are too.
What I found fascinating about your Bluebook exam is that you do have shorter passages followed by single questions, which I thought was interesting, because obviously some kids might not be as good in multiple choice, but they might be stronger in those. But, as you were speaking, it reminds me of take-home exams, right? Very often, I remember in college, the take-home exams were far harder than the in-class exam, because, it wasn't just having the answers, it's having to now go much deeper. And I'm wondering, even if AI, it's like a take-home exam. You have this tool, but it's not, do you have the critical thinking to write a strong paper? And does it get the message across and XYZ? So
go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm just thinking out loud.
I think that's hard. I think AI is getting so good so fast that it'd be hard. Like, I had the same thought early on, 18 months ago of like, is it just asking them to solve something differently, more complex, as you say, and then they can use AI? But it's really hard to figure out what AI can or can't do right now. And so I think part of we're working on this writing work where, and we hope to offer it in the next few years to high schools and colleges, but where a teacher, like part of the writing task would be done in class with the lockdown browser, where they know they can't use AI, and with the teachers, essentially the proctor, and so part of the assignment would be done there, and then part of it they could take home once they've done that, and they can use AI to do certain parts. So it's somewhat take home, but it's a bit different. I worry a lot of teachers and professors are moving toward either physical written exams, so no computer, so they can't use AI, or oral exams, and both of those have died out for good reason. They're very time consuming. They don't scale. And in AP, every year we have 6 million exams. We have 3 million students. We have about 30,000 readers. These are college professors or high school teachers that read the AP exams at these big convention centers every June. And they read, 50 million written responses. And we used to do it in writing, like handwritten. And I would go to these, and it was so much was illegible, so much was so hard to decipher. And it's also just the writing process itself. Like writing's advanced, and I think we're all more efficient when you can write and edit it live versus trying to write the draft perfectly. So I'm worried that people are going to go to a little bit backwards in how they assess because they haven't figured it out. I'm hoping they will still let it be online, but they'll do it in a way that certain parts of that assessment can have AI turned off.
So I must ask this question because this question, I remember when test optional, obviously California, a lot of the schools you see especially became test blind. What's been the impact on College Board and students taking tests? And now there's some colleges who've gone back to requiring this. For our audience, I think it's a fascinating topic. It keeps coming up. How did you all look at this test optional trend, and how has it impacted you as an organization?
So we're a membership organization, so a lot of our members are test optional, and so I know I think at our core we believe that that ideally admissions, you use holistic admissions, meaning you look at a lot of data points to make the right decision. And we do think a useful data point is whether it's an ACT or SAT score, but a college entrance exam that is representative of the student work. And there are students that do poorly on standardized exams. So it shouldn't be the only measure. You should be looking at GPA, you should look at activities, you should look at their essay. Ideally, you have interviews or whatever you can do. So we do believe it's valuable to have that, and it's weird to us the test blind that refuse to even let students submit that because it's one data point. They may submit 18 clubs they're in or 13 jobs, but they can't submit this one exam that they've done. That seems crazy to us, but on the test optional we get it, and look, schools have a lot of pressure today. I listened to a number of your podcasts. I really enjoyed them. And a lot of those presidents, a hard job, right? Because of the demographic cliff, because of the perception of higher, because of the competition, because of really expensive costs to deliver higher ed when you think about the facilities and the number of adults you need at an institution. So it is hard. And so one of the ways that colleges reacted is they're trying to, get more students in the door. And part of that is increasing the application funnel. And to be clear, like sometimes a standardized score, if you have it, it can be a disincentive for a student who doesn't do well in those to apply. So I think part of it is just market dynamics, which we understand. So I'd love to see colleges at least consider the college entrance exam in their admissions process, but I get why many don't.
A couple of years ago, I got a chance to visit 5 countries, education systems, all the way from K-12 to university, and the underlying issue was upscaling the workforce. So it's a generational uplift, and this is before the consumerization of ChatGPT. So I would be very interested to revisit those countries and see how they're thinking. But how do you think we should be thinking about upscaling the workforce in lieu of AI?
I think this is the central question. I think so. I'm going to go a little backwards first. I hope this is helpful. But a dozen years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of employers were saying, "Hey, we can't get enough computer science computer developers, engineers into our workforce, and we as a country weren't producing enough CS majors." And a lot of nonprofits and for-profits sort of that galvanized them. Code.org started. There's many really good organizations, and College Board had always had a CS course. In fact, in 1986, 85, 86, when I was in high school, I took a AP Pascal back then, and little did I know I'd work for the College Board. But we had one course, and we developed, as a result of hearing from the need, we developed an advanced placement computer science program, a second course in that discipline. It was made to be more accessible to more students, and it's been great. It has gotten tremendous enrollments, and it got a lot more diverse, a lot more women, a lot more students of color participated than had in our traditional computer science course. And so it was a real win. We know now that I think the latest I saw is CSP majors coming out of college have a 6% unemployment rate. And so the job market for them has softened. It's not gone away, so I think it's sometimes overblown, but it has softened. And there's a critique now, and now we're hearing employers say we need certain skills for an AI world, even if they're still somewhat ill-defined. But what's interesting is, someone I want to hear in education is the answer to this is we got to stop listening to employers. We just got to do what we do, which is the worst result of that. Now, here's the issue, right? With AI in particular, industry is going to evolve in like 6 months, year, maybe even faster, 2 months kind of iterations of what they need. And the education system is set up to evolve in 10-year or at least multi-year cycles. We face that with AP. I mean, we often, when we traditionally would introduce a new AP course, we'd spend almost 5 years to develop that course, because we would canvass every college that offers this course and try to standardize a curriculum that represented the average what a college does, and then we have to define the learning objectives and the assessments, but that doesn't work. Like, if it took us 5 years to develop an AI CSP course, that would be a disaster. So we're having to do that much quicker than we are comfortable with, and I think we'll do it quite quickly. But I don't think higher ed and K-12 are set up to move that agilely. So that's the biggest, to me, what worries me is it is also continuing ed, to your point, but I'm focused on how do we make sure that 21, 22, 23-year-olds that are graduating college, or 17, 18-year-olds that graduate high school, are ready for the workforce, where what is needed by employers is changing. The answer isn't, oh, stop listening to employers because they're fickle or they're changing too fast. We have to figure out how the education system responds much more quickly.
And I mean, I'm sure you're looking at this trends as far as the demographic shift in education. I mean, at least what we're seeing on our network is white male students are the number that are going to college is proportionally decreasing. Many of them are saying, listen, I could make 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 doing vocational jobs. I don't need to, or getting paid higher. Let's not put a number on it.
Yeah.
And also, companies like IBM, they're putting value on job experience. Over 50% of their hires actually may not have a college degree, and you got all of these micro credentials. So what do you tell parents at this point who are, college education is going to cost you anything between $70,000 to $250,000, depending on where you go, to get an undergraduate degree, and it's 4 to 5 years commitment, so the opportunity cost there. So what is the message to parents at this point that no, it's good to make this investment and think about the future of your son or daughter, or and the value of higher education. I said a lot there, but
No. Good. Got it, and good question. Look, I think for a large part of students, college has a positive ROI. It's a good investment, and I don't think that story there's obviously instances where it's not. The absolute worst thing you can do is debt without a degree, right? You go to college, you don't finish, you don't get the degree, but you take out debt in the process. And there have been, unfortunately, some colleges that have sort of feasted on students to try to get them to enroll knowing they wouldn't finish, but to get the federal aid, and that's a disaster. Most students that get a degrey have a positive ROI, and I think that story isn't always told. That doesn't mean all students should go to higher ed. To your point, it depends on the student, it depends on their interests, it depends on their skills and knowledge, it depends on what profession they aspire to. I will say on the degree, I think what we have reports, and we can send links so you can put in the show notes, but like we do analysis of sort of the ROI of college broadly, and again it's a whole spectrum, and there are exceptions, but what I think where people miss the mark, because I hear the argument a lot, well, someone can get this job without a college degree and it pays, X dollars per year, which is more than the average college degree in the colleges that they would go to. Average salary of a recent graduate from nearby colleges. So doesn't make sense. But the problem with that analysis is if you look at 1 year, you're right. And if it was a 1 year decision, no question, maybe even a 5 year decision. But if you look at the lifelong earnings, like a lot of those professions, when you don't go to college and you get a degree, you may be getting a job that pays $70,000 a year, but the increase over the next 20 years is much less than people who've got a college degree and getting professions where they do get those raises. So I think it's a short-term thinking, which we all suffer from, of like, I can get paid this right away, but what is my long-term earning potential? What am I doing to that by not going to college? So again, I'm in no way advocating all students should be applying or going to college. And in fact, as I mentioned at the beginning, College Board is focusing a lot more on exactly what you're talking about. Can you create new credentials, new degrees, new ways of upskilling students so they can get into the workforce if they're not necessarily going to college? And we, to that end, Advanced Placement introduced a couple new courses, and one in cybersecurity, one in business, and they're designed specifically to teach skills that could be useful if you go to college, or could be sort of like other AP courses, but also could be just entryways directly into the workforce. So we're very aware of the pressures you mentioned, and frankly, the necessity of doing better by those students.
But I think, time after time, presidents are telling us that we build people for life, not just for work. I think there's something to that, because life is becoming more complex, and having different skills as you're raising a family or dealing with situations. After all, what's the only time you have where you're not at your parents' house and you're not at work? It's that period of time where you could be a little stupid, as I was,
Yeah, probably we all were, but yeah, and you develop real. We talk again about like some of these teamwork and leadership skills and problem solving and communications, like those you do develop, or you continue to develop in college. I will say, like I'd almost flip the question on you, and you should flip on your guest, which is, you start the question of like, okay, it's going to cost 70 to 200K or whatever the range you gave me. Why is that? Like, why does it need to cost that? Like, and we're seeing some movement, like some accreditation for three-year degrees, but like, college and education in the US changes very, very slowly, right? We all know that. But maybe now it's such a crisis that it's going to require some more radical rethink, and not by all institutions. We should have a whole range of them, but maybe we need to figure out, how do you do a degree? Like, I'd love to challenge a college to come up and say, hey, the cost of tuition, room and board is the max Pell number, and see if you can deliver it in that. What would that mean? So that means for the listeners, if you're fully eligible for the Max Pal, you would take out zero debt. Like, can we create a learning experience that delivers skills at that? So then, let's say, yeah, you don't get the perfect job out of it, but if if you think of a return on investment, it's two parts. It's like what's the return, what you get out of it, and how much you put in. If you can dramatically lower the investment side of that equation, it puts less pressure on the return. And so I think colleges really need to figure out really radically different. And that's been a disappointing piece, because when I spoke at a JP Morgan event, and they had college financial aid, college CFOs. And I was just chatting with them about, like, how are they thinking about, is there ways that they can really reshape their cost structure? And they're like, yeah, this year, we only increased salaries by 2% instead of 3%. I'm like, that's a rounding error. That is not anything that is going to really reimagine the costs and have a massive change. So I think we need pressure on that side of the equation as well.
Well, first of all, there's the accreditation, and how schools are accredited by these non-government bodies, and how much it costs to just keep getting accredited, and minimums you have to meet. That probably has to change a little bit. But also, I think the big beautiful bill is going to put pressure, because there are going to be caps that are going to start hitting in June and July of next year. So I think invariably colleges are going to be forced. But I also think the accreditation puts them at a disadvantage trying to meet some of these goals. One of the many areas, and also keeping up with the Joneses, all the facility costs and everything that goes on. Because facility is often not just new facilities, but the upkeep and maintenance is so expensive for a lot of universities. I just talked to a university, and they're losing money, even though they've had enrollment growth, simply because of the maintenance of 100-year-old buildings is very expensive.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I raised my kids in a town in New Jersey, Maplewood, New Jersey, and I got to know the school system, and they have a wonderfully diverse, very successful school system. But I talked to the superintendent and the board members, and the New Jersey, the governor had years ago had capped the amount you could increase. The amount schools were getting was max, I think 3%, and I don't hold me to it. Or some low single digit percent of how much more money they would get. But then they looked at three things, exactly what you said. One was facilities, so they had these 100-year-old buildings in this town, and just the upkeep every year was going up like 10% a year, and there was no way around it. That was just a fact. Two, healthcare costs, and this was a long time ago, so it was before the federal HAA, but so it was before that act, but it was when they were trying to provide healthcare, and those were going up at 10% a year. And then three is the number of students that required special, who had special needs and required special instruction was growing at 10%. The cost to serve those kids, because that population was just growing. And so, good news is some of the healthcare has slowed, but on the, at least for now. But the facilities, as you mentioned, and then the students with special needs that need to be served, at least in high school and K-12, are growing disproportionately. So, like, it is an incredibly complex equation to figure out how to manage. But again, they have to figure it out. Higher ed has to figure out a way to offer significantly lower cost options, at least some schools. I think that has to be part of the answer here.
Well, higher education has been very resilient, pushing back against change. Now, since the Great Recession, they've been forced because of the financial liquidity issues, because of COVID, because of a lot of policy changes, demographic shifts that has happened in higher education. It just seems like AI is going to really, really push institutions. And I'm wondering, do you think how we grant degrees is going to change, accreditation? How do you see the next 5 years when it comes to these forces with AI being the engine?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, because I agree with your sort of premise that sometimes the accreditation rules can be restricting and they can uh, slow innovation at times or slow flexibility. But we know, right, in history that regulations have a cost, but deregulation also has a cost.
Yes.
So, I'm half fearful, like if you don't have standards and so forth, what's gonna emerge. And but on the other hand, sometimes the requirements for accreditation can be limiting. So I don't have a great answer. I know that's not what you're looking for, but I do think they will evolve. I think schools are going to have to figure out how to, as I said earlier, how to move much more quickly and flexibly to meet the needs of what the workforce is going to require of their graduates. And I don't think, I'm not a doomsdayer. I don't think like what they teach today is completely disconnected to employment. Again, I think many of the skills you develop, even in not hard skills but soft skills, are important, and maybe even more important now, because like the hard skills, those AI may be able to deliver those, but again, your ability to do critical thinking, problem solving, communicate, participate well in a team, like those are going to have a high value today, and that's only going to increase, at least relative, in an AI world. And I think a lot of colleges really do well at helping individuals develop those skills or further refine those skills.
And just as interesting, Jeremy, is going to be how K-12 adapts to this world, especially since the whole message is lifelong learning. You're going to have to keep upscaling your skill, and it is clear that we're not going to be less busy with AI. And so, the two final question is, how do you see K-12 adapting to this new reality or paradigm?
I think, like higher ed, it moves incredibly slowly. And part of that is there's a lot of systemic reasons for that. But I think most classrooms today, how they're taught is strikingly similar to how our grandparents would have been taught if they were in this country in high school or K-12, 80 years ago. So that's disturbing. And so, yeah, I think they'll be slow to evolve. My hope is that there's a tipping point where the pressure becomes so great that they really have to do something more radical and dramatic than they've been. And maybe we're seeing that with all the pressures, just like we're talking about higher ed. I think K-12's facing those same set of pressures. So I'm hopeful. I think AI can be a useful tool. We're working with all our K-12 members to try to help them figure out how to leverage AI to free up time, and then how to use it effectively. I mean, two things that I'm sure you've heard for my whole time in education. There's been the promise of personalization. We're going to have personalized learning, and it makes perfect sense. Like, what if we're both learning at something, different things than I know? If it's personalized, it's going to be more efficient. Who wouldn't want that, or who did? So it makes sense. Yet there's so few things like technology tools that have succeeded in getting results using a personalized approach. But maybe that's just, with innovation, they say one form of wrong is being early. Maybe that was early for personalization. So maybe there's an opportunity there. The other is I'm actually interviewing an author on tutoring. And when COVID hit and the federal ESSER funds massive amount of funds got funneled into K-12. And the biggest thing they spent it on was tutoring, because they realized that was the best thing to get, the most likely thing to get students to grade level. So we've had, over the last 5 years, this incredibly massive experiment where schools, districts, states, all were doing these different programs. And so this author, Liz Cohn, she basically researched all these experiments and trying to find it. And I was heartened, because I think, not a magic bullet, but there are a lot of those that showed really, really incredible results of bringing kids to grade levels, getting them back at least closer. It's not cheap, like you need tutors, and part of why the teacher to student ratio is like 1 to 25, 1 to 30 is because it's less expensive than 1 to 3 or 1 to 5. But I think used part in a strategic way, tutoring with personalization has a great opportunity to help K-12 catch up a bit, or I shouldn't say catch up, but react to the changing times.
Final question: what would College Board look like, in your opinion, 5 years from now?
We would be serving students and members, and I think if we're successful, we are helping both colleges and K-12 systems make some of the changes I'm suggesting or saying they need to do to serve students, so that's helping them teach more efficiently, help improve learning outcomes that are tied to skills they're going to need in this ever-changing world. I don't want to claim like we have it figured out, because these things are moving so fast, as you mentioned. But we have a lot of very smart people working very closely with all our members to try to solve this. So we want to be part of that solution, and hopefully, if we have a discussion in 5 years, we're much more optimistic than we are today.
It's been a pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. I enjoyed it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.